Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in again. I am Kaylee Batesman, the Content Director at SheCanCode, and today we are discussing conversations with my younger self. I've got the amazing Karen Worstell, Senior Cybersecurity Strategist at VMware Carbon Black, with me today to reflect on her early career days and the hurdles she overcame. From overcoming self-doubt to navigating gender biases, Karen is here to share her wisdom and offer encouragement, because we've all probably had that question ourselves at some point and thought, what on earth would I say to my younger self? And so thank you, Karen. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, Kaylee. It's really exciting, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Good, because I think it is a question that we have all thought of before. What would I say to my younger self? And I'm so pleased that you're on here to discuss it. Can we get started with a little bit of background about yourself, please?
Mm-hmm. Sure. I am a serial CISO. I think that's what most people know me in my recent career. And today I work for VMware. I am a cybersecurity strategist, and I work with CISOs and their teams in various companies around the world.
Was it always your goal to go into tech? I mean, when you say CISO, did you think that you would say that when you were younger, that one would work in the tech sector and that you would work in security?
Right. Well, so no, when I was younger, we didn't have personal computers yet. So, to be honest, I'm the artist in the family, of my four siblings, my three siblings, four of us total. And my two brothers and my sister were all quite technical. My sister actually always wanted to be an engineer, and she ended up going to Caltech and MIT. I designed Barbie doll ball gowns, and I love to paint. I was a performance student in music. I play multiple instruments. That was, I'm kind of I'm the gardener, that kind of thing. I'm 98% right-brained. It's just not my natural tendency. And I was raised by a Navy fighter pilot father whose intention was that his girls would study science, and that we would that we would have jobs someday. And it was quite the shock to my system. I very dutifully went to college. I went to university, and I studied chemistry and molecular biology. I got degrees in both of those. And I really loved biological science. I was pretty good at it. And so I worked for a time as a research assistant in the medical school at the University of Washington. And then I had two children. And so we're still, in those days, if I wanted to do anything with computing, I was taking my card deck to the mainframe at the computer center at the university. So it shows you how old I am, but that was still not my chosen profession. It wasn't until much later when I actually found myself in a bit of a hard spot. And I had been out of the work field for a while. I had chosen to spend time with my two small children. And it became apparent that I was going to need to find a good paying job. And I ended up, about that same time, my brother came over with a TRS-80 Model 1 computer, laid it out across the kitchen table. He said, "Sister, you need to learn to code." And I found it to be a really interesting, creative outlet for me. I was coding to me was total creativity. Like, you could make anything. It tapped into a lot of my systems thinking that I had been trained in at university, but also had this really fun component to it. So I found out that I was really good at it. And when I went to a local university to where I was living at the time, opened up a computer science department and a new graduate program in computer science. And I thought, And so I went ahead and applied for that, in spite of the fact that I had no money and I didn't think I was going to be very good at math, and I had two really small children. And to my surprise, I got accepted, and with grants and credit cards and lots of help from my mom babysitting, I managed to get my master's degree in computer science in a couple of years.
Oh.
So when I started in my first job, information security was kind of not a thing yet. There were three products in security, 3 total. 2 of them were for IBM mainframes, and one of them was government furnished crypto gear. So this world that we live in today just wasn't even imagined. We were still hacking the university's computer. Ran VMS version 4. So like security was just not something. People were still dealing with, the DARPANET, the military network. It was our source for email, and whole different world.
Yeah. And I just want to clarify for our listeners, I didn't know Karen was going to say that, because she doesn't look like she has that much experience behind her, and the world was that different back then. So yeah, it's so interesting always to hear though how you're encouraged to go into a certain area, and and so interesting as well that came from some of your siblings and your father, to hear kind of what encouraged you to go down that path. And I love it when people on here say they didn't know as well that tech was going to be so creative, because I hear that so often. People just think it's coding, I'm going to get in and I'm going to put my headphones on, it's not going to be very creative. And then most coders that have been on here chatting with me, they say, I didn't know I could be creative and come up with things and solve problems. And it's almost like one of those best kept secrets in tech, but it's creative. How bizarre.
Yeah, it is.
More people should know that.
And it's like with anything new, like we're always looking at new technologies and new ways of delivering technology. We're still talking like generative AI now. We have another new thing. We have data science, and the combination of data science and security, combination of security and generative AI. Like those are new frontiers. We don't really know what they're going to be, but that's been the opportunity that technology has provided for decades. And I think it's what makes it such a fun place to work.
Yes, definitely. And when you were younger, obviously you had very different ideas about what you wanted to do. And you said that you designed Barbie doll dresses. And was that what you wanted to do? Did you want to be a designer when you were younger? Is that where that started?
I think that's probably, if things had been left to their own, just that natural course of things, that's what I did in all my free time. I learned to sew at a very young age, and I sewed by hand. And then I took sewing lessons where I could use a real machine when I was about 12. But I always designed either first clothes for my dolls, but then I made, I would do my own paper dolls, and I would design their dresses, and then I would make my own clothes. And so, yeah, that was kind of textiles and all of that for me, that tactile thing, and the seeing a finished product like that for me has always been fun.
Yes, and the same in tech, just building things and being able to see what that looks like at the end. It's always super interesting to hear what people wanted to be when they were younger, and how that kind of feeds into their career later in life. And you told us a little bit about your journey into the industry after you got your master's, and you went on. Was it when you went into the industry, was there the company that you got into, was it, what was that like, going into your first tech job, and how did that feel? You're very new in that area, and what was that journey like?
Well, I was hired as a data analyst, but I was hired to do a data analyst job for government projects. And so what that evolved into was administering security for projects for the US government that were being done at the Boeing company. And so that's where I got started in the very early fundamentals of the, computer security side. So, we ended up doing projects like the B-2 bomber, the F-22 fighter jet, that kind of jazz. And there came a point where my boss decided that I needed to shift from something that I was actually really good at and I really liked. And he wanted me to do something that I had never heard of before. Nobody I knew had heard of it before. And he's like, yeah, we're going to transfer you. You're moving up into research and technology, and you're going to help develop the security standards for the OSI operating model for distributed computing. And we're like, what's distributed computing? And it was, I kind of went kicking and screaming. I was happy doing what I was doing. Yeah. And he was like, no, I need you to go up here and do this other thing. It turned out to be so pivotal because it put me on the very bleeding edge of working with different standards groups and companies like HP and IBM, where we were designing the standards of how this world of distributed computing was going to work and how the security was going to work. And it was like nobody had thought about it before. Like the internet hadn't been commercialized yet. So we didn't have internet connecting everything together. So when I ended up doing that job, it introduced me to this way of thinking about things on a very broad systems level and looking forward. I like to always say now it's, I try to design things for what comes after what comes next.
Yes.
Instead of just dealing with what's right in front of me. And it does speak to something that I hear often from, young people who are entering into a new field, is that you can't be what you can't see. And I question that to some degree because my entire career has always been stepping into a role to do something that nobody has done before. There was no roadmap. There was no blueprint. There was no advisor. It was like, you have to go out there and figure it out. And are you going to make mistakes? Yes. But we'll figure it out and it'll be what it'll be. Right.
It sounds like you had a great manager as well that kind of saw something in you that you might not have seen in yourself at that young age and just kind of trusted that manager to think, okay, I'll go with it.
I fought it tooth and nail. I really didn't want to go. I did not. I was afraid, and it speaks to this other thing that I think people fear. And that is, what if I fail? Yeah. Like, what if this is not something that I'm able to do? Like, I had no idea. I had nobody ahead of me to tell me how this was going to work. And so, yeah, I was afraid.
Yeah.
And it taught me a really valuable lesson. It put me on the very front edge, cutting edge of security, which paved the way for all of the other jobs that I had down the road because I became the expert by default.
Yeah.
And it opened doors to so many opportunities and so many conversations at high levels in other companies that had I not taken that job, I don't know that would have opened up to me.
Yes. And you mentioned a little bit about, being afraid to try something new, and you hadn't at that point, had the confidence to try something and just think it's okay to fail. Did you ever have, or do you still have, that feeling of imposter syndrome? I think that's something that we talk about a lot on here, and we know a lot of ladies feel that way. Is that something that you felt at that time and might still feel now?
Yeah, I've had those moments. It's like, what if everybody finds out that I'm really not who they think I am? Yeah. I'm always surprised when I hear people talk about my career and say, oh, yeah, that's so amazing. You did incredible things. What an incredible story. And I'm like, yeah, nah, Not really. It was really, I like to say, you know what? Extraordinary things happen one ordinary day at a time. And so you can accomplish really quite amazing things by just showing up and continuing to do the work. And saying yes to the opportunities that are hard. Where I think the imposter syndrome, which so many people deal with, can be a problem is when it stops you from saying yes. And that's typically, I've heard statistics that women have that problem in particular because we assume that we have to have 100% of everything we need in order to be successful at a new opportunity, right? Certainly I felt like I did not have what I needed to move into a new role and be successful at it, but I was. And I showed that over and over again in my career that we can figure this out as we go. So I guess I'm more like some of the guys who will, have zero of what they need and say yes to a new opportunity because they know they can figure it out. And I think, women can do just the same thing. If that's been the pattern of my career. So yeah, there were moments where I had doubts, right? I had a boss one time ask me, he goes, we had a very difficult problem in front of us. And he goes, how are you going to do this? And I was like, I have no idea, but I promise I will figure it out. I promise.
And that's being honest as well, and I think a lot of us have that feeling, you know what, I have no idea. I'm going to be honest, I have no idea, but it's finding a solution and finding your way through, instead of also sometimes this feeling like you can't be authentic and you would have to turn around and go, oh, I've absolutely got this. But internally you're thinking, I really don't know how I'm going to handle this problem. But I suppose, again, that's finding yourself at the right company within the right culture where you can be authentic and say, I don't know, but I will find a way forward.
Well, I have learned, but the hard way, that it's just better to be frank, honestly frank about where things are, right? Because trying to sugarcoat it doesn't really help. I mean, I had one really valuable lesson. I was I was the CEO of a Silicon Valley startup. I had to go in front of a board of directors and give them an 18-month forecast, and it had red ink in it. The very honest version was, this is what this looks like, and they actually said, how dare you come in here and show us a forecast that has red ink? Go back and fix this and make sure when you come back, there's no red ink. And I was like, well, how are we going to do that? How am I going to do that and be honest? Without, painting myself into a corner. And we ended up going back and making the forecast over again with showing it all positive. But what we did was we said, these are the assumptions that must be true in order for this forecast to be real. And that was another really great learning lesson, because what we had then was a board who was committed to helping us make those assumptions true. And that was it's just those lessons all along the way, that being transparent and not fearing what will people think. I think that might be our biggest hurdle, that the imposter syndrome is related to what will people think if they find out the truth. And I'm like, just tell them the truth.
Yes, because I wanted to ask you about advice on addressing these feelings, and that just being transparent and open is one thing. And I love the fact earlier you said just showing up and doing the hard work and saying yes is another way of just getting over that imposter syndrome. Just saying yes and being honest about things as well is kind of so important, isn't it, to addressing those feelings that a lot of us have all had.
There's in Brene Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart, she makes a very good point that in our bodies, we experience the emotion of excitement and the emotion of anxiety the exact same way. And what's
Oh,
super important about that is the language we use to describe what we're feeling. So if I say, oh my gosh, this is terrifying, I don't know what I'm going to do, that's anxiety producing, and it will guide your next steps in a certain direction. Opposed to if I say, oh my gosh, this is the most amazing opportunity, I can't wait to figure it out. You're going to take different action depending on how you language what you're experiencing. And I think women in particular, we're wired to be protective. We're wired to be safe. We like security, right? And we tend to maybe go on the side of anxiety, and that guides the way we talk to others about what we're doing. And so if I say, if I'm speaking to another person, and I use a lot of qualifiers because I want to, I'm being transparent, but I'm using a lot of qualifiers about it, and it's softening my position and it's weakening my position, as opposed to coming back and being just as forthright and straightforward with no qualifiers and telling people how it is,
yeah.
and not being afraid to do that. I have positioned myself as confident. I'm speaking confidently to myself as much as I am to another person. And so there's some things that we can all watch for that will help as we move through our careers, and look for those opportunities and have other people help us find those opportunities where we can really shine and show up as the problem solver.
And the fact that you just said that the way that you talk to yourself, you're speaking to yourself in a very confident way. We're not very kind to ourselves, are we? The way that we can talk to ourselves. And I've said this before on the podcast. It's sometimes somebody told me once, you should always talk to yourself the way that you would talk to a friend, because 9 times out of 10 you're quite caring and kind to friends, and like, oh, don't do that, you're going to be great. But when it comes to the way that you talk to yourself, a lot of people, you tend to put yourself down. You think, actually, I can't do that. Or I'm like, you would never say that to your best friend. So yeah, sometimes just that internal speak of, even back to our subject today, what would you say to your younger self? Probably just be kinder to yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself.
I was thinking about that. You're absolutely right. It's like, don't be so hard on yourself. It's going to be okay. You don't have to have it all figured out. Nobody has it all figured out.
Yeah.
People just move forward, and, take time to make sure you take time to focus on all the parts of your life, and don't feel like you have to pour 110% into your job when where you're going to feel like you're not ever doing enough anyway.
Yes.
But be kinder to yourself, and use language, on yourself. Watch the language you use. Speak with confidence. Don't qualify everything. And in the morning, and and I like to put my energetic music on in the morning. But one of the things I heard of from another podcast, Mel Robbins, she does a high five in the mirror. And so it's like, you got this. Yeah. Whatever this day brings, you've got it.
You've got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great advice. Yeah. So that literally just say to yourself in the morning, whatever the day brings me is going to be fine. I love the fact as well you just brought up there that, thinking that everybody else has everything figured out, and sometimes you feel like you're the only one that hasn't got it. And that's
right.
Normally not true. It's just some people are just better at hiding that they haven't got it figured out. That's what it starts to dawn on you as you go through your career, and you think, actually, I wasn't the only one that was thinking, why is everybody else so calm? Or social media doesn't really help with that either, does it? People only share the positives, and they share all the good things, and it looks like everybody has their whole career mapped out and their whole lives mapped out. It's great for celebrating each other, and we know what, for instance, women in tech celebrating what we're doing, and that's wonderful. But sometimes it can have the opposite effect, where people think, oh, am I the only one that, am I failing? Am I failing in this area? Have I just, not got it figured out and everybody else looks great?
One of the best pieces of advice I read was from Jordan Peterson, who said, don't compare yourself to who other people are today. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday. When we get into the comparison game, it's just such a dead end.
Yeah.
Don't, if you can look at other people and celebrate their success or their apparent success, whatever it is, right? Their manufactured success in many cases, right? Go feel wonderful for them, celebrate them, and then celebrate yourself for where you are today compared to where you were yesterday. That's the game. It's not, don't get into the trap. It's a trap to be trying to look at these artificial images and say, how am I measuring up? I should be further along. I hear this a lot. I should be further along than I am right now.
Yes.
And I got my master's degree when I was 32.
Yeah, because everybody's journey is different. As you know, exactly as you said, to compare yourself to somebody else just makes you feel like, oh, I haven't done that yet. And everybody's journey is very different. And somebody might be looking, to you at some point and thinking, well, I haven't done what they've done either. You think, gosh, it's never good to compare.
That's why I come back to that statement. Every extraordinary accomplishment happens one ordinary day at a time. Mm-hmm. Just keep going, right? Yeah. And find people that you can talk to about, what can I do next, or where do you see this going, or find a sponsor wherever you're working who's going to be that person that opens an opportunity for you.
Oh,
a person who represents you when you're not in the room.
Oh, yes. The idea of a sponsor definitely is such good advice. To find somebody, as you said, who is just, when you are not present, it's just that advocate for you when you are not there, is so valuable. And a conversation we've had a few times on this podcast of just, finding yourself. Sometimes we had a conversation on here recently about ladies being over mentored and under sponsored is usually what happens. So finding a sponsor can be so valuable.
Yeah, it's a game changer. Lots and lots of men, at some point you can get over coached.
Yes.
And another thing I say sometimes is that an opinion is what I go seeking when I know the answer, but I don't like it.
Yeah.
And so, but I've also done the thing where I felt like, oh, I'm going to need somebody to help me with this. I'm going to need somebody to help me with this. And I end up with 4 different coaches who are all giving me advice. And I realized in that process, I was like, whoa, I just overlook, like I can't even focus on all of this. I have so much input. I can't think about where to go next. They're not saying the same thing. So, it's okay to stay focused, and it's okay to work on the extraordinary on a narrow set of things, as opposed to trying to do too many things all at once, because that just won't ever work.
Yes, definitely. And one area I wanted to address with you today was about role models, and we spoke about not comparing ourselves to people, but it is great to have role models and somebody to look to for inspiration. And we're a firm believer in role models here at SheCanCode. Do you have any role models in the industry yourself?
For today?
Yes. Perhaps did you have any influences at home that were really good role models for you?
You know what? Somebody pointed this out to me the other day. I surround myself with books. To me, books are my circle of advisors. And I have authors whose advice and their worldview is really important to me. So
Yes.
I listen and read a lot. And I think that's where it comes from for me, is that, and role models to me are more like, this is a person who this is how they see making a contribution in the world. This is how they see treating other people in the world. Those are the people that I try to emulate.
Yes. Yes, I love that. And again, it's we say on here a lot of you can't be what you can't see. And you're right. If somebody is putting themselves out there and writing a book about, whatever it may be that you're reading, you can see that, and you can think, actually that's something that I aspire to be like, that person, whatever it may be. If they have a trait, say being a good leader, or something like that. Definitely, putting your story out there, even, some ladies on here, I love that they come on here and tell their stories, because some people don't know that they've got great stories to tell, which is bizarre to me. I think, come on and tell your story, because the more people that hear about it, the more can hear it and be inspired, and think, actually that's what I would like to do, or that's the kind of traits that I would like to show somebody else as an example when I become a leader. So you're absolutely right. Just surrounding ourselves with great resources can really help. And surrounding yourselves with um, people as well. I wanted to ask you a little bit about a support network. Are you part of tech communities or groups? Is there anybody that you kind of tap into for your network, in addition to the resources that you like to use?
I've always believed in having one or two trusted coaches. And so I usually hire someone who after I get to know them, who will hold me accountable to what I say I want to do, and will also reflect back to me things that they see that where I may be inconsistent. So I'm always looking. I must have grown up that way, but I always look for the person. I don't want people around me who are telling me what a great job I'm doing.
Yeah.
Actually, I want people around me to tell me how to be better. And I think that's just continuing to grow. That's growth. As long as we're growing, we're living. As when we stop growing, we start dying. So that's how you were talking about role models, and I think I've never said this before, but I think what I've done is I've created a composite of what my role model would be, my ideal would be. And I've created it on the basis of character traits. So these are the character traits, 13 character traits. And this is how I would describe the way I would like to show up in those character traits. Where can I see that in another person, and bring that, make that a goal for me.
Yeah.
And then hire somebody who is in my support network, who will say, yeah, you're doing that, except this thing you do that's getting in your way.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my method.
Yeah. And picking out those traits as well, I suppose. When you're younger, you wouldn't, you don't tend to go for certain traits when you're younger. You're so different in when you start your career, and the things that you think you want when you're younger are very different as you go through your career. Based on that, if you could, what would you tell your younger self?
I would tell my younger self that the most important thing is to do what you do because you love it, not because you fear failure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Choose what you do wisely and do it for love of what you do, as opposed to fear of what will happen if you don't.
Yeah, instead of having that regret as well, thinking, yeah, if you turn down an opportunity, as you were saying earlier, you know, imposter syndrome becomes that problem when you stop saying yes to things and it gets in your way. And yeah, and then you think, actually, what could have been if I'd actually said yes to that opportunity. Or when you went kicking and screaming to that new opportunity, and what you know, the different direction that took you in. Yeah, that's really good advice to do the things that you love, instead of fearing failure. I think as well, as a society, we get used to just thinking, you know, that sometimes, especially if you're in the wrong company, you can't try new things because, you know, if you do fail, you there's the finger pointing of, you know, instead of a team huddling together and thinking this is why it failed and this is how we're going to move forward, it's kind of just, you know, criticism and blame. And I think sometimes being in a good company, in a good culture, where you can feel like you can try new things and fail, really does help you, especially when you're quite early in your career, to kind of have that confidence to keep trying, and coming up with new things and failing and thinking it's, you know, it's okay that I'm trying new things.
Yeah, I would say those cultures are rare. And I think, and now I'm gonna be the Debbie Downer on something, but here's the truth is that people do go into what I call the penalty box when something doesn't go right. And there can be consequences that follow them in their career path if they stay at the same company. I'm a huge advocate of moving. You will build your career so much faster by moving around. And that does seem to be the trend nowadays, that people, especially in the, you know, developer world, even in the cybersecurity world, they move companies quite a bit. That is a really good way to avoid the protracted penalty box. You know, in the days when people had a career that was at one company, and that penalty box, you just had to kind of go into it and work your way out of it. And I think for women, that was much harder to do. So don't, I mean, you know what? The penalty box happens. I've been there. And it's not the end of the world. And you have lots of choices. So it's more like, you know, we have to have that talk with ourselves about, you know, I've learned from this. If it was my mistake, I've learned, this is what I've learned from it. This is how I'm framing that in as positive a way as possible when I talk to myself about it, and I don't beat myself up. And now I'm going to take that, what I learned there, and use it in my next opportunity.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I love that. Just reframing it and thinking, yep, I just, you know, won't do that again, or try that differently next time. Or yeah, you are right, it's quite easy to get into that position where you just beat yourself up about something, and it can really stop you from moving forward into whatever that next opportunity is.
When we dwell on that stuff, it's like trying to drive a car looking in the rearview mirror.
Yeah.
You can't see what's in front of you because you're just really busy focusing all your energy in the past. And you're also not, you're robbing yourself of the present. So it's yes, done, over, lesson learned, move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are almost out of time. I could talk to you for another half hour on this, but I wanted to ask you one last question.
Sure.
Do you have any last words of wisdom or advice for our listeners?
I would say take the risk. You know, there's no growth without risk, and nothing is risk-free. And women, we love security. We do love that. But growth is way more fun.
Yeah.
And, you know, like I said, compare yourself to who you were yesterday, and just keep in mind that in every obstacle that you're going to encounter, you're going to learn something. It's all about learning. Every obstacle we encounter that we overcome, one way or another, even if we fail, is going to be the learning opportunity for what comes after, what comes next.
Yeah, just learning from your mistakes and being kinder to yourself. I love that. I absolutely love this episode today. Thank you so much, Karen, for taking the time to chat with me. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on here. So thank you so much.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much.
And to everybody listening, as always, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again next time.